Welcome. Be sure to like and subscribe for more scary stories, or I will come for you. I'd like to thank ZLA2563, Caden Brower and Anna for rejoining the Curator's disciples. Your viewership is very much appreciated. If anyone would like early access to my latest stories and an ad-free listening experience, consider becoming one of the Curator's disciples. The link is in the description below. Finally, a reminder that all stories are available on my podcast. The Curator, Dark Web Horror Anthology, is available on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Without further ado, today's story, Roulette, Royale, by the Curator. I've always been a man of shadows, even before the dark web swallowed me whole. My name is Harlan Crowe, Detective Inspector with the Metropolitan Police's Cybercrime Unit in London. Born in the grim industrial sprawl of Manchester in 1978, I grew up in a council flat that reeked of damp and despair. The kind where the wallpaper peeled like old skin and the radiators clanked like distant gunfire. My father was a factory worker, a hulking brute with calloused hands and a perpetual scowl, who drowned his failures in pints of bitter ale at the local pub, only to stumble home and unleash his rage on my mother and me. I remember the nights vividly, with the crash of furniture against thin walls, the muffled sobs echoing through the vents, and the metallic tang of blood from split lips and bruised knuckles. By age 10, I'd learned to hide in the crawlspace under the stairs, clutching a flashlight and a dog-eared copy of some pulp thriller, escaping into worlds where justice prevailed and villains met their end. Those stories were my armor, my escape hatch from the chaos. School became my true refuge, a sanctuary of structure amid the turmoil. I was sharp, obsessive even, devouring books on computers and code, while my peers kicked footballs in the rain-slicked streets, their laughter muffled by the perpetual gray drizzle. By 16, I'd hacked my first system. It was a local library's outdated database, just to extend borrowing limits on sci-fi novels that transported me to galaxies far from my father's fists. It was thrilling, that rush of power surging through my veins like electricity. But it scared me too, the ease with which I could bend digital rules. I channeled it into legitimacy, earning a scholarship to Cambridge for computer science. There, amid the ancient spires and the snobbery of blue-blooded classmates, I honed my skills, burying myself in algorithms and encryption, graduating top of my class in 2000. The Met recruited me straight out, seeing potential in a working-class lad who could navigate the burgeoning digital underworld without the history of privilege. My early career was a relentless grind of petty cyber frauds, phishing scams that preyed on the gullible, and identity thefts that left lives in tatters. But September 11th shattered the world and reshaped my path. Suddenly, cybersecurity was a national priority, and I found myself thrust into counter-terrorism ops, tracing jihadist forums hidden in the web's underbelly and decrypting encrypted chatter that whispered of impending doom. It was exhilarating and exhausting, a high-stakes game where every line of code could avert catastrophe. Amid the chaos, I married Elena in 2005, a fiery Italian analyst I met on a joint Europol task force in Brussels. She was my anchor, with her sharp wit and dark eyes that saw through my defenses. We had a daughter, Lily, in 2008. She was my little light in the darkness, with her infectious giggle and tiny hands that clutched my finger like a lifeline. But the job eroded me, piece by piece. Sleepless nights staring at glowing screens, unraveling plots that could end thousands of lives in an instant. Elena left in 2015, packing her bags and taking Lily to Rome, citing my obsession with the abyss. She wasn't wrong. By then, I delved into the dark web, that lawless expanse, accessible only via Tor, where anonymity bred monstrosities far worse than any terrorist cell. I'd seen horrors there that no one should, child exploitation rings that made my stomach churn with bile, arms dealers peddling instruments of death to the highest bidder, hitmen for hire advertising their services like plumbers in the yellow pages. But I prided myself on detachment. I had a clinical eye, dissecting code like a surgeon wielding a scalpel. Promotions came steadily, sergeant by 2010, inspector by 2020. I led takedowns of major dark net markets, earning commendations from brass and enemies in equal measure. Whispers of death threats from cartel hackers filtered through the grapevine, but I shrugged them off with a bitter laugh. What could they do? I was the hunter, armed with firewalls and forensic tools. That illusion shattered on a drizzly October evening in 2025. I was alone in my cramped flat in Hackney, the kind with peeling wallpaper and a view of graffiti-scarred alleys that stretched into the fog-shrouded night. Lily's photo on my desk mocked my solitude, her smiling face a reminder of what I'd lost. I'd just wrapped a case involving ransomware on NHS hospitals. It was nasty stuff, encrypting patient records and demanding crypto ransoms, but routine in my world. My secure email pinged with an anonymous tip, routed through layers of proxies that I could almost admire for their sophistication. Russian Roulette 2.0, the subject read. The body, not games. Real. Place your bets. Link attached. Stop them if you can. Skeptical as ever, I scanned for malware. It was clean, with no hidden payloads. The link led to a Tor hidden service, a forum called Abyss Bets. I'd heard of it in hushed briefings, a den for extreme gambling, from stream dogfights in abandoned warehouses to underground MMA, bouts where bones snapped like dry twigs. But this thread was buried deep, password protected behind layers of obfuscation. The tip included the creds, a string of alphanumeric gibberish that unlocked the door. Logging in, I felt the familiar chill creep up my spine. The site's black background swallowed the screen, red text dripping like fresh blood, users with handles like Blood Reaper 69 and Gore Lord bantering in encrypted chat rooms. The post was stark, live streamed tonight. Vietnamese special. 5 players. 1 bullet. Bets open. A link to a streaming room pulsed below it. I clicked, heart pounding despite myself, the cursor hovering like a reluctant executioner. The feed loaded slowly, pixelated at first, then sharpening into nightmare clarity. A dingy basement unfolded before me. Walls slick with mold and condensation. The air thick enough to see the humidity warping the lens. Fluorescent bulbs flickered overhead, casting a jaundiced glow on 5 figures strapped to rickety metal chairs around a scarred wooden table that bore the scars of previous atrocities, gouges, burns, and dark stains that could only be blood. They were foreigners. They were tourists by their mismatched clothes, faded backpacks slung nearby, sandals caked in mud, terrified faces etched with confusion and dread. The camera pans slowly, lingering on each victim like a predator sizing up prey. First, a young American lad, early 20s, shaggy blonde hair matted with sweat, his college t-shirt clinging to his chest. His eyes darted wildly, mouth taped shut but muffled whimpers escaping through the adhesive. Next, a Frenchwoman, mid-30s, brunette curls plastered to her forehead, tears carving tracks through the dirt on her cheeks, her summer dress torn at the hem. Then an Australian bloke, burly and broad-shouldered, tattooed arms straining against zip ties that bit into his flesh, his face flushed with futile rage. A German man, bespectacled and scholarly-looking, hyperventilating behind fogged lenses, his khaki shorts soiled with fear. And finally, a British expat, older, with a graying beard, his Union Jack t-shirt a cruel irony in this foreign hell, his eyes pleading silently. At the table's center sat a motorized lazy Susan, scavenged from some cheap Chinese takeaway, but twisted into something sinister, mounted with a gleaming revolver. It was a .44 Magnum, its barrel polished to a menacing sheen. The cylinder was visible, loaded with a single bullet, the rest empty chambers mocking the victims with false hope. The chat sidebar exploded with depravity. Bet on the Yank first. 100 Bitcoin. Make the bitch scream. Emojis of skulls, blood drops, and laughing faces scrolled endlessly. Viewers numbered in the hundreds, donations ticking up in crypto wallets, the digital equivalent of blood money. Masked handlers lurked in the shadows, with black hoods, gloves, silent as specters, their movements precise and mechanical. One stepped forward, voice distorted through a modulator that turned words into a robotic growl. Welcome to Roulette. Rules. The wheel spins. It points at you. You pull the trigger. Hesitate, and we make it worse. He activated the device. It whirred like a demented carnival ride, the revolver blurring in a hypnotic circle. My breath caught in my throat. This couldn't be real. It could be deep fakes, actors in some elaborate hoax. But the details screamed authenticity. The victim's sweat-soaked clothes clinging like second skins, the basement's stifling heat causing rivulets of condensation to drip from the ceiling, flies buzzing lazily around a rusted drain in the corner where previous horrors had pooled. I screenshot everything frantically, noting IP traces and metadata, but Tor masked it all in a web of anonymity. The lazy Susan began its first spin, the motor humming with a low, ominous vibration that seemed to echo through the speakers into my flat. It rotated slowly at first, building speed, the revolver glinting under the flickering lights as it passed each victim in turn. The American's eyes widened, tracking it with raw panic. The Frenchwoman's chest heaved in shallow, rapid breaths. The Australian growled low curses under his tape. The German's glasses slipped slightly as sweat poured down his face. The British expat closed his eyes tightly, muttering what looked like silent prayers. The chat buzzed with anticipation. Come on, land on the girl. Make it dramatic. Double bets, if it's the old Brit first. The wheel slowed gradually, the clicks of the mechanism growing louder, more deliberate, like a ticking bomb. It teetered between the American and the Frenchwoman, inching forward and back in agonizing hesitation, before finally creaking to a halt with mechanical finality. The barrel pointed at the American. His eyes bulged in terror, body convulsing against the restraints like a trapped animal. A handler approached, his boots thudding heavily on the concrete floor, and roughly untaped his mouth. The young man screamed immediately, his voice cracking with desperation. Please, I have a family. Oh God, no. This can't be happening. Let me go. I'll do anything. He thrashed his head side to side, sweat flying from his hair, his pleas devolving into incoherent sobs as the reality sank in. The other victims watched in frozen horror, their muffled whimpers growing louder through their tapes. The chat laughed cruelly. "Pull it, pussy. Show us the red mist." Crybaby yank. "Bets on a clean headshot." The handler forced his trembling arm free. Zip ties cut deeper into his wrist, drawing fresh blood that trickled down his hand. The handler guided it to the grip. The American's fingers shook violently as he lifted the gun to his temple, the barrel pressing into his skin, indenting it slightly. He hesitated, hyperventilating, his free hand clenching into a fist on the table. "No, no, no," he whispered, eyes squeezed shut. A handler prodded him with a cattle prod, the electric crackle and his resulting yelp filling the air, forcing his finger to curl around the trigger. The cylinder had been spun by the handler earlier, randomizing the chamber. Time seemed to stretch as he held there, the chat chanting pull, 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 in rapid scrolls. Then, with a final, broken sob, he pulled. The boom echoed through my speakers, deafening and visceral. The high-caliber round blasted through his skull, exiting the other side in a gruesome fountain of blood, brain matter, and bone shards that splattered across the table and onto the French woman's lap. His body slumped forward, forehead smacking the table with a wet thud, crimson pooling outward, seeping into the cracks in the wood like ink on parchment. The chat erupted. First blood. Pay up. Donations surged. The viewers' bloodlust fed. The handlers didn't remove the corpse. They left it there as a macabre prop, blood dripping rhythmically onto the concrete floor, the metallic scent almost palpable even through the screen. They reloaded the cylinder with a single bullet, the click of the chamber snapping shut, sending a fresh wave of dread through the remaining victims. The handler spun it anew with a casual flick, randomizing fate once more, and restarted the lazy Susan. Its whir built again, faster this time, the revolver a silver blur against the blood-streaked table. The survivors' eyes locked on it, their bodies rigid with tension. The Frenchwoman's tears flowed unchecked. The Australian's veins bulged in his neck as he strained futilely. The German's breaths came in ragged gasps that fogged his lenses further. The British expat's face paled to a ghostly white. The chat speculated wildly. Hope it's the Sheila next. Messy ones are best. Triple on the German cracking first. The wheel decelerated. The motor's hum dropping in pitch, the clicks echoing like heartbeats in the stifling room. It hovered teasingly near the Australian, then inched past to the German before swinging back and slowing, until it pointed unerringly at the French woman. She thrashed wildly, her chair scraping against the floor with metallic screeches, screaming in accented English through the tape. The words muffled but desperate. "I'll pay anything." The handler ripped the tape free with a sharp tear, her pleas exploding into hysterical wails, her body heaving with sobs that shook her entire frame. "I have children. Please. God, not like this. Let me call them just once," she begged, her voice breaking, mascara-streaked tears mixing with sweat on her face. The other victims averted their eyes, unable to watch, their own terror amplified by her raw fear. The chat reveled. "Scream louder, bitch." Bets on a jaw shot. A handler untied one of her hands, the zip tie slicing into her skin, and forced her to grasp the gun. She resisted at first, her arm trembling violently, but a jab from the cattle prod into her side elicited a piercing shriek that cut through the feed, her body arching in pain. She pressed the revolver to her temple, the cold metal leaving a red mark on her skin, her finger hovering over the trigger. "Please, mercy," she whispered, her eyes darting to the camera as if pleading with the invisible audience. Chat scrolled with demands. Do it slow. Build the suspense. Seconds dragged on, her breaths coming in short, panicked bursts until the prod threatened again. With a final, gut-wrenching cry, she pulled. The revolver bucked violently, the bullet hitting off center and shattering her jaw in a grotesque explosion. Teeth flew like shrapnel, flesh tearing open in ragged flaps, her tongue lolling grotesquely in the exposed wound. She gurgled, blood bubbling from her mouth and nose, her body twitching as shock set in, eyes wide and aware, drowning in unimaginable agony. The camera zoomed in mercilessly, capturing every detail, the mangled bone, the pulsing veins. Chat, messy kill. Love, the spray. I vomited into my waste bin, bile burning my throat, the acrid smell filling my flat. This was real. These people were dying for entertainment, their final moments commodified for crypto bets. The handlers left her body slumped, blood mixing with the Americans in a growing puddle that reflected the flickering lights like a dark mirror. They reloaded once more, the single bullet sliding into the cylinder with a chilling finality, spun it, and set the lazy Susan in motion again. The whir seemed louder now, amplified by the silence of the dead and the muffled sobs of the living. The Australian's rage had turned to grim determination, his muscles tensing as the wheel spun. The German muttered frantic words under his breath, perhaps equations or memories to distract himself. The British expat's lips moved in silent negotiation with whatever god he believed in. The chat grew frenzied. Aussie tough guy. Bet he takes it like a man. Save the old fart for last. The spin slowed, the mechanism groaning as if weary from the carnage, teasing between the German and the Australian before settling firmly on the burly man from down under. Third spin, the Australian. He cursed in a thick accent the moment the tape was yanked off, his voice booming with defiance. You fucking bastards. I'll haunt every one of ya if this goes south. But beneath the bravado, his eyes betrayed sheer terror, darting to the bodies beside him, the stench of blood and voided bowels now thick in the humid air. He fought with every ounce of strength, muscles bulging against the ties, veins popping like cords on his neck and arms, grunting as he tried to rock his chair free. The handlers prodded him relentlessly with the cattle prod, sparks flying and his body jerking with each zap, forcing sweat to pour anew. Not like this. Not for your sick fun, he snarled, his free hand shaking as it was guided to the gun. He gripped it tightly, knuckles white, pressing it to his temple with a defiant glare at the camera. Tell my family I love 'em, he muttered, his voice cracking for the first time. The chat mocked. Big talk, small balls, pull it. He held there, breaths deep and deliberate, as if willing the chamber empty, the tension coiling like a spring. Then, with a roar of fury, he pulled. The round pulverized his eye socket, the orbital bone crumbling like eggshell, his eye bursting in a jelly-like spray that arced across the room. The exit wound blew out the back of his head, scalp flapping open, brain exposed in a pink-gray pulp that steamed in the humid air. He convulsed, a dark stain spreading across his pants as his bladder released, then went still, his remaining eye staring blankly at the ceiling. The basement now reeked even more intensely, the air heavy with the coppery tang of blood and the acrid bite of gunpowder, flies swarming thicker around the fresh wounds. The handlers reloaded impassively, the bullet's insertion a ritual now, spinning the cylinder before activating the lazy Susan once again. Only 3 left. No, 2 alive amid the growing pile of death. The wheel spun with its familiar whir, but the sound felt heavier, laden with the weight of what had come before. The German's hyperventilation bordered on panic attack, his chest rising and falling erratically. The British expat's face was ashen, his beard quivering with suppressed sobs. The chat demanded more. German's gonna piss himself bets on a neck hit. The spin dragged on, the motor seeming to tease as it slowed, passing the British expat twice before halting on the German. Fourth, the German. He hesitated longest after the tape was removed, murmuring prayers in his native tongue, his voice a trembling whisper. Voter unsurim Himmel. Please, I am a professor. I have students who need me. Let me go, I beg you. His glasses fogged completely now, slipping down his nose as tears streamed, his body shivering uncontrollably in the chair. He tried to reason, his scholarly mind grasping at logic. This is madness. There's no gain in this. But the handlers ignored him, forcing his hand to the gun amid his feeble resistance, his arm limp with fear. The cattle prod hovered threateningly, its hum a constant reminder. He pressed the barrel to his throat by accident at first, then corrected to his temple, whispering apologies to unseen loved ones. The chat jeered, "Pray harder, nerd. Show us the spray." His finger trembled on the trigger, hovering for what felt like an eternity, his breaths wet and ragged. Finally, with a resigned whimper, he pulled. The shot ripped open his throat instead, an arterial spray that painted the table and nearby walls in rhythmic pulses. He clutched the wound desperately, blood squirting between his fingers, choking on it with wet, desperate gasps. It was a slow death, minutes of gurgling and arching in pain, his glasses slipping off entirely, fogged with his final breaths, his body gradually stilling as life ebbed away in crimson rivers. Now, only the British expat remained, the spins having cruelly spared him until the end, the lazy Susan's final words landing elsewhere each time, building his dread to a fever pitch. He was trembling uncontrollably, his graying beard soaked with sweat and tears, dragged before the camera by two handlers as the game concluded. His tape was torn off, and his pleas came hoarse and broken. "Please, I have kids back home. A wife. This isn't right. I've survived this far. Let me live." He bargained desperately, his voice rising in pitch. "I'll pay. I'll join you. Anything, just not this." The other bodies surrounded him like silent accusations, the room a charnel house of cooling flesh and congealing blood. The chat demanded more, insatiable. "Finish him off. Bonus round." But the game was over. He was the winner. Yet mercy wasn't in the script. A handler pressed the barrel to his forehead, ignoring his escalating sobs and final, frantic pleas. "No. Wait, think about it. Please." The tension peaked as the handler's finger tightened slowly on the trigger, the expat's eyes bulging in ultimate terror. The pull was deliberate. The bullet tore a gaping hole, gray matter pulsating briefly in the cavity before he slumped, lifeless, joining the others in a heap of cooling flesh. The feed cut abruptly, leaving only a black screen and the chat's lingering echoes of glee. I sat there, shaking, sweat cold on my skin, my hands numb on the keyboard. The metadata. I dove in, analyzing packets with frantic keystrokes. Geotags were hidden, but I cracked a sliver of encryption, triangulating signals to a rural area in Vietnam, an abandoned concrete plant near a forgotten village outside Hanoi, surrounded by rice paddies and jungle overgrowth. I alerted Interpol immediately, then Vietnamese authorities through secure channels. The raid happened the next day. Special forces stormed the site at dawn, finding the basement exactly as I'd seen it, with blood-soaked floors sticky underfoot. Bodies rotting in the tropical heat, flies laying eggs in the open wounds, maggots writhing in the exposed flesh and cavities. The faces were frozen in eternal agony, jawless grins leaking fluids, eyeless sockets staring into oblivion, throats torn open like ragged smiles. The air reeked of copper and decay, a stench that clung to the rescuers' clothes for days. But the perpetrators were gone, vanished into the ether, their equipment stripped clean, with no servers, no traces beyond the carnage. Back in London, the nightmares began almost immediately. I'd wake screaming in the dead of night, sheets soaked in sweat, visions of spinning cylinders and exploding heads replaying in slow motion, blood splattering my face in warm, sticky bursts. The sounds haunted me, with the booms, the gurgles, the chat's digital cackles. My flat became a prison. I'd pace the creaking floorboards, chain smoking until my lungs burned, staring at Lily's photo and wondering if I'd ever see her again without the taint of this horror. My superiors noticed the cracks, with missed briefings, trembling hands during presentations. They mandated therapy. It's PTSD, Harlan. Take time off. Get help before it consumes you. The first psych visit was in a sterile NHS office in Westminster with Dr. Amelia Voss, a no-nonsense psychiatrist in her 50s, her glasses perched on a sharp nose, her voice calm but probing. "Tell me about the dreams," she'd say, notepad in hand. I'd recount the details, voice cracking, the weight of it all pressing down like the basement's humid air. Sessions blurred into one another, twice a week at first, delving into my childhood traumas, the divorce, the job's toll. She prescribed antidepressants for the anxiety, beta blockers for the heart-pounding flashbacks, but the pills dulled the edges without erasing the core. Rehabilitation came next, a forced leave that felt like exile. They sent me to a discreet facility in the Cotswolds, a converted manor house surrounded by rolling hills and sheep-dotted fields, far from London's digital hum. It was group therapy hell, sitting in circles with other broken souls, ex-soldiers haunted by IEDs, firefighters reliving collapses, sharing stories under fluorescent lights that reminded me too much of that basement. Visualize a safe space, the counselor intoned. But my mind always wandered back to the crawl space under the stairs, now tainted by blood. Individual sessions with Voss continued via video, her face pixelated on my laptop. "You're dissociating, Harlan. Ground yourself. Name 5 things you can see." I'd list them, with the oak desk, the rain-streaked window, the mug of cold tea, but the horrors lurked just beyond. Months dragged on. I walked the grounds obsessively, miles of muddy paths under gray skies, replaying the stream in my head, questioning if I could have acted faster. Nightmares evolved. Now I was strapped to the chair, the revolver cold against my temple, the chat betting on my demise. Psych visits intensified, with cognitive behavioral therapy to rewire the triggers, EMDR sessions, where I'd follow her finger with my eyes, processing the trauma frame by frame. "You're not the hunter anymore," Voss said one day. "You're the survivor. Honor that." Slowly, cracks of light pierced the shadows. I reconnected with Lily via hesitant video calls, her teenage voice a balm, though I shielded her from the details. Elena softened, allowing visits to roam. By spring 2026, I returned to the Met on light duty with desk work, training rookies on dark web basics. No more deep dives. The abyss still called, a whisper in quiet moments, but I'd learned to turn away. Justice didn't always prevail. but survival was its own victory. And in the end, that's what kept me going, one click at a time. This is the Curator. I hope you've enjoyed today's scary story. Until next time,